So, acute stress can actually enhance your focus and alertness, which is so essential when we're walking into that pen and we're trying to pay attention to what our horse is doing, what the exhibitors around us are doing, how we want to be performing, trying to keep in the back of our mind all of the things that our coaches told us. And so, being acutely stressed, we're going to be more heightened and be able to tap into those different senses.
Welcome to Elevate Your Ride, the podcast dedicated to elevating your performance in the saddle. I'm Ellie, your personal trainer.
And I'm Lauren, your mindset coach.
On this episode, Ellie and I want to talk about stress. Stress is extremely common in today's world, especially for anyone who competes. Whether you're competing at the World Show or at an open show, stress is more than likely going to occur. So, we want to talk about the goods and the bads of stress, because not all stress is inherently bad. Ellie, can you explain what some of the different types of stress are?
Yes, so we've got many different types of stress. So we're going to pick a couple key ones that we think are relevant for equestrians. So, first, we've got acute stress versus chronic stress. So, acute stress is more short term, like going and showing in your class, packing your suitcase when you're getting ready for the horse show, waiting at the airport, that sort of like short term stress that we get when we're like going to a horse show or going to a ride, things like that. So, acute stress is not necessarily a bad thing as long as you're not having acute stress too often. So, something that we're going to dive into later on in the episode is how not all stress is a negative thing. So, if we bring up acute stress, that's kind of what that means. And then chronic stress would be more like long term stress, like your horse is going on stall rest for a year, or maybe you're not in a positive environment in your barn, or maybe you don't make quite enough money to show at the level that you're currently showing at. So things like that, where it's more long term. That is the type of stress that is not necessarily as positive and can have a negative impact on your health, your performance in the arena, your relationships, that sorts of things. So, acute stress, not always bad. Chronic stress, typically not as good. So, those are two kinds of stress. And then we've got a couple more. So, you can have acute stress or chronic stress for the following types of categories. So, we've got like physical stress, which is like weightlifting, going to ride your horse, injuries, illnesses, anything to do with your physical body. And then we've got mental stress, so like thoughts, beliefs, emotions, like, oh, I'm nervous, then I'm going to go into this class and not do very well. Or I'm worried about what people are going to think about the outfit that I'm wearing at the horse show, or kind of things like that. That, in my opinion, is what most equestrians tend to struggle with the most, is that mental stress. And then we've got emotional stress, which is caused more by like relationships, life events, traumatic experiences, things like that, more of those kind of bigger ticket items. Like if you're not in a great relationship, like with a barn mate, a friend, a parent, a spouse, things like that, that's more of the emotional stress. And then we have environmental stress. So that's being nervous in a large crowd, a busy warm up arena, natural disasters, things like that are kind of out of our control. So those are kind of the main types of stress that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, I love that. That was such a great breakdown. So, thank you for explaining those. And like you said, some amount of stress is actually good for us as competitors because utilizing stress to make you peak at the right time, it's a game changer for some of our performances. And so, it's just a matter of controlling that chronic stress and minimizing it and capitalizing on that acute stress at the right time. So, excellent explanation.
Thank you very much. Can you dive into a little bit more about acute versus chronic stress and how maybe dealing with like more of like that short-term stress is not necessarily a terrible thing, but then long-term stress can be detrimental more to like your mental and emotional health?
Yeah, absolutely. So, acute stress can actually enhance your focus and alertness, which is so essential when we're walking into that pen and we're trying to pay attention to what our horse is doing, what the exhibitors around us are doing, how we want to be performing, trying to keep in the back of our mind all of the things that our coaches told us. And so, being acutely stressed, we're going to be more heightened and be able to tap into those different senses. It will release a little bit of adrenaline and cortisol, which is what helps to sharpen the focus and improve your reaction times. And it also can help you stay alert and respond very quickly under those situations. So if your horse goes to lope off on the wrong lead, you're just boom, you feel it, fix it, end up the judge doesn't even notice. Stress can also motivate action, which is so essential in the sport of competition because if you're stressed that you have a competition coming up and you don't do anything about it, that stress is going to become anxiety, which anxiety is not taking action. So the stress will prompt the feeling, which leads to an action that helps you mitigate the feeling of anxiety. So if we can see this stress as a signal to take action, we can use that and not be afraid of that feeling of stress. We can say, okay, I feel this. Ask a question. Why do I feel this? What is it trying to tell me? And then take actions to remedy whatever that kind of gap or downfall that the stress is trying to tell you that you have. So let's say you're getting ready for a show and you're feeling stressed. Well, if the pattern is available beforehand, then the action you can take is to print it out, highlight the different gates and everything, spend time visualizing yourself doing it. And so that way you can feel very confident that you know the pattern when you walk into the arena. Another great thing is that acute stress will build resilience over time. So if you can put yourself through these acutely stressful situations over and over and over and come out on the other side successfully, like that will make it so that way the next time that stressor comes up, you're not going to have as strong of a reaction. And when I say successfully, it doesn't mean that it has to be a win or a perfect score. It means that you performed the task, you did it to the best of your ability, and if the outcome wasn't ideal, you learned from it. That is still success because you have gotten closer to being the best you that you can be. Another thing that stress is a signal is that you care. You know, if you are stressed about something, it's because you care about it. And so I think that that is a great signal to you to be like, okay, this matters to me. So I need to do what it takes to pay attention to this and give it the time that it needs in order for me to feel better about it. Where we get into trouble is when we have that kind of chronic stress where it's just kind of low lying all the time, whether, as Ellie said, it's from your barn environment, from your family environment, from your financial environment. That is where it starts to wear on you. And you can really have physical symptoms that linger with you that, are hard to combat. There's studies that show being in a bad relationship can cause hypothyroidism. It it will have an adverse effect on your physical well-being. So managing that chronic stress is more important than managing the acute stress. Put yourself in an environment that you feel safe in, whether it's knowing that your horse is safe, whether it's knowing that your emotional well-being is safe, whether it's that you know that your finances are safe. Don't overextend yourself to where you are feeling stressed all the time because your body doesn't need that. And sometimes it just physically cannot handle that.
I hope Natalie's listening to that and says, "Oh my gosh, yes, she's talking about safety."
Yeah. I mean, because it really truly is the basis of what we are doing and what our body is trying to tell us. Safety can come from knowledge, safety can come from compassion, safety can come from a lot of different areas. It's just knowing that where that stressor is telling you you need to feel and find safety in.
Yes, for sure. So I want to break down a little bit more, knowing if somebody is having, like, if you're listening to this and you're wondering, you're like, oh, I wonder if I have chronic stress or I wonder if I just have acute stress. So a couple symptoms of chronic stress would be like fatigue, muscle aches, headaches, insomnia, digestive problems, just a weakened immune system, elevated blood pressure, and then accompanied with anxiety, depression, irritability, feeling overwhelmed, forgetting things, losing interest in showing or horses in general or something else that you really enjoy. There could be changes in your appetite, substance abuse, so drinking more, having a hard time making decisions, procrastinating. There's a pretty long list of symptoms of that chronic stress. But if you were listening to that and you were like, oh, like I kind of relate to a lot of those, then looking into what's causing your chronic stress and figuring out what it is can help you take action to relieving that stress. Because, Lauren, can you think of a time when you've had more chronic stress in your life and how that impacted you in the show pen?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a period of time where I felt that, my personal life had maybe a little bit more stress than it needed to. And I felt very hindered when I stepped into the show pen. My ability to focus and put all of my efforts into my pattern were definitely diminished. I'd say I was functioning at probably 60 to 70% of my total capabilities. When I went out there, I was riding scared. I guess that's a great way to put it, because I felt like, oh my gosh, so much is riding on this from my chronic stress that I would safety up and go out there and not do well because I was so afraid of messing up and causing quote unquote more stress. I allowed those thoughts to make me feel like it was the end all be all. And if I didn't try to protect it to kinda, quote, unquote, "save myself," that it was just going to be bad, and by doing that, I was just very, very average, and then I also felt a big effect when we would work out together when I was kind of in those chronic stress states. Sometimes I would get injured more easily, or I would just not be able to lift as hard because mentally I would be held back. I mean, I know that you remember some of those sessions where I was like, I just can't today." And you were always awesome and would make us do mobility or lift lighter weights so then I could still feel like I accomplished something. But when you are in that chronic stress state, like, your body just has a hard time. What have you noticed from working with your clients when they're more in the chronic stress stage when they work out with you versus, like, an acutely stressed person?
That's a great question. I guess I'll use you as a little bit of an example. But I see this across any client that I have that is in more of a chronic stress stage. I can predict based off how a client is interacting with me. And kind of what I mean by that is like I can tell if they are having a little bit of a hard day versus if they're having like a hard year. Like there's a difference, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And I can tell that when a client is more in that chronic stress, maybe they have something going on with their horse, something going on with their family, something going on with their job. It doesn't really matter what it is. I can predict when that client is going to stop working with me pretty well. Like I can pick up on that very well. And usually when a client stops working with me, I have a very, very low turnover rate. And I'm not saying that to like try to boost, make you guys think, "Oh, Ellie has this phenomenal program that nobody drops out of." It's not necessarily that. It's that when somebody starts an exercise program that they really relate to and see results in, they tend to stick with it unless an outside factor comes in. So, like Lauren, actually, you were one of my first clients, and I am still working with a good majority of the very first clients who started working with me. And I started my business 4 years ago. Like, when people are in a good spot in their personal life, they want to work towards being the best version of themselves. And the people who have a lot going on in their life, that's when they quit. And so, like, I've had very many clients that have had something happen, and I can just tell based on their enthusiasm levels, their progress, things like that, that they're just not putting their best foot forward towards their workouts. And then they usually end up stop working with me because they're not seeing any progress. They've got too much stress going on in their lives. It's like they can't even, they're so stressed that the thought of exercise is just not even attainable. It's not even something that they can do. So my clients who do not manage their chronic stress as well as others, and maybe it's not even about managing it, maybe it's just the type of chronic stress that they have. I'm not quite sure on, but my clients who have a really, really hard time with their chronic stress, they don't tend to see as much benefit out of my program. I can say that with fairly high confidence. The people who are not emotionally there and who cannot give the workouts their all, they don't stick around very long. The clients who are in a good state emotionally and who are able to kind of, and that doesn't necessarily mean that nothing bad ever happens to them. It just means that they have a different outlook on it and they don't have that chronic stress, right? So it's not necessarily the things that happen to you, it's how you deal with it, it's how you manage it. And that I notice a really, really big difference in. And whenever I have clients who are kind of in that stage, if they don't stop working with me entirely, we together decide to just see each other less because there's no sense in them paying me to see me every week if they're not getting the benefit out of it. Usually, like, I'll start saying, okay, like, let's see if we can take the stress of working out off a little bit. Let's work out a little bit less. Let's not see me as often because sometimes even just seeing me can bring even more stress because they're like, oh, but like I haven't been consistent with my workouts. And even when I am doing them, I'm not able to push myself to the full potential. I think that you've struggled with that before, right? Where it's like, man, I don't even want to see Ellie today because I feel like she's going to be disappointed in me. And that can cause even more stress, right? So even though obviously that's not what I'm thinking, that's what the client will sometimes think. So learning how to manage stress is really, really, really important. Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to Elevate Your Ride. We're so excited to continue helping you elevate your performance in the saddle. To keep bringing you quality content and information, we're asking you to help us. Tell your friends about us on our podcast, like and share a meaningful quote you saw on our social media, write us a review on Spotify or Facebook. You can also join our Facebook group and ask all your health and fitness questions, or maybe post a success story to motivate another amateur. Your engagement really helps us support and encourage the equestrian community. We're also inviting sponsors and supporters to help us build our show. As a sponsor, starting at just $150, you'll receive marketing on our podcast, website, and growing social media platforms for your business. It's the perfect way to connect with the equestrian community and showcase your brand to our dedicated listeners. And for our supporters, your $50 contribution gets you a shout out on our social media and website. Every bit of support really helps fuel the show and helps us inspire and motivate equestrians. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can scroll down to the show notes of this episode and look for the become a supporter or become a sponsor links and click on those to get some more information. Thank you for listening. We can't wait to continue expanding our platform and helping you elevate your ride.
Hey, Elevate Your Ride fans. Are you loving our show and looking for a way to show your support? Check out our line of Elevate Your Ride merchandise. From stylish t shirts to cozy hoodies to journals and hats, we have everything you need to represent your favorite podcast. Ready to gear up? Click on the Buy Our Merchandise Here link in the podcast notes, or head on over to our website, elevateyourride.co, and click on the Store tab. Thank you for your support. Make sure to like, follow, and share our platform with your friends. So, yeah, I had a hard time where I'd be like, "Oh man, Ellie's gonna be so disappointed because I'm not lifting as heavy as I could, or I missed a week or whatever." But you know what? Showing up and answering that phone call and going through and accepting that I am where I'm at, that is what makes me feel better and be able to get through it. It's that fear at the beginning, and you almost have more stress before seeing you about seeing you than
Mhm.
you actually do once I actually see you and then afterwards. And so I think that that's a
Yeah.
really key thing that we need to think about when we're going through some of these stressful times is that a lot of times if we just can face it, experience it and go through it, we're gonna realize that it's okay, and sometimes too, we need to just lower the expectations we have for ourselves, in which I feel like we have this podcast called Elevate Your Ride, and it's all about being your best, but maybe the best that day is to lower your expectations and to be grateful that you just did something.
Yeah, for sure. So, can you speak on a little bit about how it was really hard for you to show up for yourself, show up for your workouts, show up to your rides, things like that when you had more chronic stress going on in your life? And then how did you get out of that state? How did you get away from that chronic stress?
Yeah, absolutely. So the hardest part for me was I felt like I didn't want anyone to know that I had chronic stress. Someone like you who I had a really close relationship with, you would notice and you would pick up on, and every now and then I would kind of let you in as to what I was experiencing. But to a majority of the world, nobody knew. And that was almost more exhausting and stressful than the stress itself was, right? Because I was kind of putting on a facade to make sure that everyone else wouldn't feel stressed or burdened by whatever I was going through. And, what really helped was, you don't have to let the whole world know, but having those people that you can confide in, whether it's a parent, a best friend, your best friend, workout partner, business co-host, all the things, whether it's the trainer, just have somebody that you can talk to. That is really, really helpful. And just make sure too, when you are doing that, talk to somebody. It doesn't become just a constant complain fest. When we talk things
Yes.
out, yeah, yeah, there's a big difference because when we talk things out, we can find solutions to our problems a lot of times because when we just ruminate and keep it all inside, we aren't able to maybe process as well as when we can verbalize it. So having that trusted person that you can go to, help you kind of bounce ideas around, that's a really, really great option. And just like I said, make sure it doesn't turn into where all you do is complain. And the difference between working something out and complaining is when you're complaining, you have no intention of taking action or finding remedies. When you are
Yes.
Yeah, when you are sorting things out, you are being introspective, you're asking for feedback, and you're going to then go do something with it. So that's the biggest thing. As I said earlier, like one of the best remedies for anxiety is action. And so we just need to try to take steps in the middle of what we're feeling to be able to move forward.
Yeah. What advice would you have for somebody who has chronic stress that is trying to alleviate that stress and maybe not have it anymore?
Yeah. So big thing, like I said, is action, and maybe that action is going and talking to a therapist. There's a lot of really great ones out there, or a psychiatrist, depending on what you're exactly going through. Being able to work with your friends, or just taking a journal, writing down what that stress is, and then really thinking about what is the stress trying to tell me. If I'm stressed that I'm not going to change leads, well, maybe we need to go and practice a lot of changing leads. If I'm stressed because every time I see these people at the barn, I don't have a good time, well, maybe I need to look at finding a new barn, right? If I'm stressed because every time I go to work out, my back hurts, well, maybe we need to lift a little lighter, right? But or
Yeah.
get a personal trainer that's going to help guide you to be able to make it feel okay. But I think that the biggest thing we can do is listen to what that stress is telling us and then take action in regards to how we can work with it and let it be more of a signal to us instead of a trauma. Let's talk a little bit about physical stress and what that kind of means for us. And is there a bad physical stress?
Yes. Kind of like we talked about, you can have acute stress or chronic stress within your workouts in and of themselves. So, acute stress would be more like during your actual workout when you're actually lifting the weight. So, acute stress, I don't know if you could quite use it synonymously, but I know that there's another term that's used fairly frequently in the fitness world, and that's eustress. So, EUSTRESS. And eustress meaning that when you are lifting a weight, you are defying gravity, right? So, think of like a bicep curl. So, I want you to picture that you're holding a 10-pound dumbbell in your right hand and you're going to lift your hand up to your shoulder and do a bicep curl. That action by lifting that 10-pound weight against gravity is putting stress on your bicep muscle and on the bones that you have in your arm and in your hand. So that is eustress. That is positive stress that is creating a benefit. That sort of stress is good. That's how we build muscle, increase bone density, increase our fitness, that sort of stuff. What you don't wanna do is have too much eustress that it turns into distress. So distress would be like an excess amount of stress that your body is not either able to handle or is not capable of, like, managing it well. So that would be like, for me, a 25-pound dumbbell would be way too heavy for me to try to bicep curl in one hand. So if I put a 25-pound dumbbell in my hand and I tried to lift it up, it would put strain on my elbow joint because my bicep muscle is not strong enough to be able to hold the weight of that. So at first it would put stress on my elbow joint. And then it might put stress into my shoulder joint because then the elbow joint is saying, like this is that I'm not supposed to do this. I need help. So then the shoulder joint might try to help. And then your fingers might start slipping on the weight a little bit. So then your wrist is going to engage a little bit more. Now you're putting stress on your wrist. Like that's just an example of how like that would be too much stress. So you kind of have to find that threshold of where you're putting enough stress on your body to get better in order to improve. Because if you never put stress on your body, you're never going to get better. If you only run half a mile every day for the rest of your life, you'll never be able to run more than half a mile. If you only lift 10-pound weights and you never try to lift anything heavier, you're never going to be able to lift more than 10-pound weights. And I'm sure that you could use a similar example for mental, why if you never push yourself, you're never actually going to get better. But as far as the physical part, everybody's got a threshold. And every once in a while, you need to get close to that threshold because otherwise you never know where it is. Even though a 10-pound dumbbell is probably where I'm most comfortable lifting for a bicep curl, if I never picked up a 15-pound dumbbell, I would never know if I could. So you need to learn where your threshold is, and that threshold is going to change over time. So every once in a while, you kind of want to find that limit a little bit. But if a 15-pound dumbbell is straight up too heavy for me to be using all the time, then I should not be using it all the time. I'm going to cause an injury, and that's not going to help anything. So you need to find your threshold. You need to test it every once in a while. Now, as far as how often, that's kind of up to you and your body and how consistent you are with working out. I would say for an athlete that's consistently working out, finding that threshold maybe once a month, maybe every 6 to 8 weeks. You definitely want to test it out more than like once a year, but you don't want to be testing it out every week. Because, like I said, that's going to cause an injury. And then, kind of the same thing when you go to ride your horse. If you are never riding to the point where every once in a while, you need to ride hard enough that you're sore the next day, right? If you never ride hard enough to the point where you're never sore, you're not pushing yourself as hard as you could. But in the opposite, when you go to ride, and if you're riding so hard that you're so sore the next day that you can't walk, and you're doing that every time you go to ride, then that's not positive either. So a little bit of stress is good. A little bit of that eustress is good. Distress is bad. That's what we want to avoid.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when you are working in a structured workout program like you provide, you really focus on creating and kind of capitalizing on that you stress. And so
Mhm.
that's what's really cool about like that I've enjoyed working with you is because I'll get a little bit sore, but I'm never so sore that I can't do anything.
Well, yes, but I'm sure there has been times where you have been super sore. You know what I mean? Like, we don't do that super often, but every once in a while, I do kind of need to test and see where my clients are, and I do need to make them a little bit sore or try to make them a little bit sore for me to know where they are. It's a little bit controversial using soreness to determine whether or not the workout is good for you or not. I think that if you've been prioritizing your nutrition, your hydration, getting enough sleep, all that sort of stuff, then you can, in my opinion, use soreness as a measure of if your workout is appropriate for you or not. Now, there's some other factors involved in that as well, but that's my personal opinion in general.
Are you looking for that extra competitive edge, struggling with show pin anxiety, or looking to set and achieve meaningful goals with your horse? Schedule a session with me, Lauren, your dedicated mindset coach. As an experienced competitor, I understand the mental demands required to excel at the highest level, and I'm here to support you in building a plan to help you stay accountable and reaching those goals. For more information, check out laurencervelli.com or click on the website link in our show notes. Let's work together to elevate your ride.
Hi, everyone. It's your personal trainer, Ellie. If you're looking to become a stronger, more balanced, and flexible rider, I'm here to help. I offer virtual personal training sessions and customized workout plans that you can complete on your own. As a fellow competitor, I understand the physical demands riding requires, and my goal is to help you perform your best for your horse, whether you're preparing for a show or just want to improve your everyday rides. Visit lopindowntherailfitness.com or click on my website tab in the notes of this podcast episode to learn more. Let's work together to elevate your ride. Can you talk a little bit more about some mental eustress and distress and give some examples, kind of like I did?
Yeah, so a good example of the use stress is when you're in a lesson and your trainer is pushing you to try to learn a new concept. So that is going to be stressful because you're going to feel that you don't have the tools necessary to accomplish what they're trying to get you to do. But by working with your trainer and going through it, you're going to not only develop the tools, but you're going to be able to build up resilience. So that way, the next time they ask you to do something hard, it's not going to be as scary and stressful for you. One example of distress would be if every time you go to the barn, you feel like you're harped on by your trainer and it's not in a constructive way, then that causes a lot of distress because it's chronically there and there's no resolution to it. It just feels like it's being burdened onto you versus done to try to make you better. And I'd say that that would be kind of like the difference between the two.
Managing stress is all about like finding your threshold, and you want your threshold to be high, but you always kind of want to be right underneath it. Sometimes you kind of want to test the limits, but usually you want to be right underneath it. So, like, you want to have a coach or a trainer that's pushing you, but not pushing you so hard that you never want to be constantly leaving the barn feeling bad about yourself. Every once in a while, that's not the worst thing, right? Because then that pushes us to be better. So a little bit of stress is good. So talking about like positive stress and how that can help you in the show pen. So an example that I can think of is that I want you to picture that you're at a horse show and in the past something stressful happened. Maybe you were late for your class or you forgot your pattern or your horse kicked out during your turn, you forgot to eat before you went into the pen, something like this, right? Like even though all these examples are quote unquote bad or negative, I bet that something positive happened out of those experiences. So if you were late for your class, I bet you focused on having better time management the next time you went to a horse show. And if you forgot your pattern, you probably went home and practiced more patterns. So you got better at managing patterns, right? If your horse kicked out during your haunch turn, I bet you went and worked on haunch turns. If you forgot to eat, I bet you did a better job of meal prepping for the next horse show. So even though these things were probably perceived as negative stress at the time, maybe they in fact made you a better competitor. So that can be a little bit of an example of how stress or negative things happening can turn into a bit of a positive.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I love that.
Can you speak to that a little bit, Lauren, about how a little bit of stress is positive and pushes us as competitors?
Absolutely. It's very similar to what you were saying with lifting weights, right? If we don't challenge ourselves and lift heavier at certain points, we are never going to become what we are truly capable of. And so it's the same when we are getting lessons and coaching from our trainers. If they don't push us to try new things or to be a little bit better, and sometimes maybe it's more than we can handle in that moment, we'll never know what we truly are capable of. And so a big thing is being able to push yourself, and back to what Natalie was saying about finding that safe environment and feeling safe in yourself, is knowing that you can push yourself, but there is no judgment if it's not possible yet. And I always say yet because we want to be able to feel like we can continually be trying to be better. And so push yourself, be with a trainer that sets up an environment for you to try new things and to fail. But when you fail, it's okay because it's a learning opportunity versus you don't have to have quote unquote standard success all the time. As long as you can be with somebody who challenges you and then guides you towards a better way, like that is the best way to minimize your stress when you're in a learning environment.
Yeah, maybe a good way to know if you have like a coach that's able to help you through that or not. Like, let's say that you're stressed about a lead change and you go to do it and you finish it and it's not that great. Not terrible, but not that great. If your coach looks at you and says, that was okay, but maybe try this next time, that is more of a positive environment versus if your coach looks at you and says, that was horrible. Like, get off,
Yes.
let me get on, me show you how it's done and then you need to do it exactly like this. Like, I think that listening to how your coach speaks to you is important. And now that being said, we can't always control everything we can't always be so sensitive that we're so affected by everything in our environment. So there's like there's a balance, right? Where you can't be so sensitive, but then you don't want to be so dull that you're all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, wow, like I have a not great horse trainer that's a little abusive, right? Like there's somewhere in the middle. On the flip side of the coin, you don't necessarily want a trainer that never tells you that you're sucking, right? Like every once in a while, you kind of need to be humbled a little bit to get better.
Exactly. And it's just the part of the process of learning, right? And
Yes.
you have to know that it's okay to not be the best at everything that you do right away. That's unrealistic. So just be okay with not being good, but don't be okay with staying there.
Yes. So, if we do experience some negative stress, how do we not let that spiral into something like depression or anxiety? Are there any tools that you know of or can recommend for somebody if they're in like a little bit of a stressful situation and how to not let it become chronic?
Yeah, so like we spoke about earlier about, having that person that we can confide in and also taking action and being able to find a way out of it because there always is an option for you. Don't ever feel like you are stuck. And sometimes it takes time to find that option, but give yourself the time to explore everything and to try to find a solution to it. And don't be afraid to, if it starts to get pretty dark in your mind, to reach out to a therapist or a psychiatrist or a doctor to be able to get help because it's not something that you should feel like you have to go through alone. And so, don't be afraid to ask for help if it starts to feel too heavy.
How do you not be afraid to ask for help?
That is a great question. The toughest part of it all, right, is because a lot of times we feel that there's this unspoken obligation to have to figure things out for ourselves. And sometimes, financially, we're afraid to ask for help because what if it doesn't work and then we've spent money on therapy, right? It's kind of a scary place also because we just don't know what's behind that door. But we have to be willing to ask for help because life is really hard to do by yourself. And so love yourself and give yourself the grace and patience to be able to ask for help. There's so many different methods out there now of being able to get that, that it's worth trying and worth giving yourself that.
Yeah, I think that it can be really hard to ask for help when you're really stressed because when you're really stressed, it's almost like you have a hard time regulating your own emotions and an even harder time understanding the emotions of people around you because you're having such a hard time understanding and regulating your own that you might feel like you're such a burden to go and ask somebody for some help or some advice or something like that when in reality they really want to help you. I guess that if somebody feels like they're having a hard time going up to somebody and asking for help or asking for advice, just in my opinion, as a trainer, because, I'm also a little bit of a therapist for my clients from time to time, which I love being. I love being there for my clients and being able to help them through their life because, like I mentioned earlier, if your life is not going how you want it to, it's really, really hard to focus on exercise. So, a lot of times I am helping clients work through things that they're going through. And it's okay to ask for help. And as long as if you are worried about being a burden to somebody that you're asking help for, think about it this way. If they came to you and asked for help, what would you say to them or what would you think to them, right? Like you're not going to say no. You're a good person, right? So more than likely you've surrounded yourself with good people and if you feel like you want to ask somebody for help, then just try it. The worst that they can say is I don't know how to help you and maybe they can even give you another resource to go to. So even if you're not confident with it, still asking for help is a good thing to do, I think. I think it's really hard to manage stress without outside help because then we just overthink too much and we get like we perceive the world around us as being different than maybe it actually is. So getting outside perspectives is really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we think back to so many of the episodes that we've recorded when we've asked riders and trainers, okay, how have you learned or how what have you done when you got in a hard spot? They said, I reached out to a colleague and asked them how they would train this horse, or I had no idea what I was doing. So I just asked someone. And everybody has been so willing to help them. And everybody wants to see them succeed on their journey, just like they want to be able to help you and watch you succeed on your journey.
Thank you for listening to Elevate Your Ride. Find us on Instagram and Facebook, all linked in the podcast notes. We'll see you next time. The information provided by Elevate Your Ride is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical or professional advice. While we discuss health and fitness topics related to equestrians, the content provided through this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice. The views expressed by the host and guests on Elevate Your Ride are their own and should not be taken as professional guidance. We strive to provide accurate and up to date information, but we cannot guarantee that the information will be applicable to every individual listener or that it reflects the most current research or guidelines. Before making any changes to your health and fitness routine, we strongly recommend consulting with a qualified professional who can provide personalized advice based on your individual needs and circumstances. Elevate Your Ride and its creators will not be liable for any direct, indirect, consequential, special, exemplary, or other damages arising from the use of information on this podcast. Thank you for listening to Elevate Your Ride. We are committed to providing high quality content and appreciate your trust in us as a source of information for your health and fitness journey.